Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Figuring Out the Fight. No surprises here. This week we are talking about the fight that's on everybody's mind, Mayweather versus Pacquiao. It's happening in, just over a week, really. May 2nd, we get to see the fight that everybody is waiting for and anticipating. And so we're covering a number of topics leading up to the matchup to try and figure it out. And our topic today is Floyd Mayweather versus Southpaws. There have been a lot of people saying that Floyd Mayweather struggles with Southpaws, or at the very least, fights them differently than he does orthodox fighters. And so today we're going to take a look at Floyd's Southpaw matchups. He's fought a number of Southpaws, 7, if I'm not mistaken, over the course of his career, which is actually a pretty good percentage of 7 of 47 fights. Before we begin, I should introduce us. I am Connor Rebush of badlefthook.com, and with me is Kyle McLaughlin. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
And Kyle, I'll just go ahead and toss it over to you. Does Floyd Mayweather struggle with Southpaws? A basic, broad question for you.
Well, you actually already touched on it. It's not so much that he struggles against Southpaws, it's that he approaches them in a completely different way. We'll start with Floyd's bread and butter. Usually the first thing he will do is throw a jab to an opponent's body. It's something which a lot of people pick up on as one of his signature moves, if you will. The jab to the patented Floyd Mayweather jab to the body. It's a fantastic, it sets the tone for the fight. It starts him asserting himself in the fight. He usually tries it in the first round against orthodox fighters. He doesn't tend to assert himself until a few rounds in, and this has given him a reputation as someone who is great at making mid-fight adjustments. Against Southpaws, he does things completely differently. He asserts himself on them earlier in the fight. He doesn't throw the jab to the body, barely at all, as far as I can recall. And as I say, he tries to put his stamp on the fight a lot earlier. Maybe we can have a look at some of the reasons why that may be. But yeah, I think in a way, some people will think that that's an issue, that Floyd doesn't fight his normal way. But in my opinion, it actually shows, again, how great at adjusting he is, rather than doing it during the course of a fight. Once he's got the gauge of his opponent, he knows what he needs to do to beat a southpaw, and he actually adjusts his game plan before the first bell is even rung. So, I think Floyd fights southpaws really well. He just fights them very, very differently. Whether he can fight differently in that way against Manny Pacquiao, that's what we're going to see.
Now, I'll go ahead and take a different tack. I think that Floyd tends to hamper himself a little bit by fighting this way when he chooses a southpaw opponent. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's more than just the jab to the body. The jab altogether kind of just disappears from Mayweather's arsenal when he finds himself against a southpaw fighter. And normally I think the jab in general is probably, I say it's his best punch. Obviously, Floyd is such an accurate and precise puncher. You could almost say that 2 or 3 different punches are his best punch. Is it the jab upstairs? Is it the jab to the body? Is it the left hook? Is it the lead right? He's obviously just a hell of an accurate and precise puncher. Picks his shots very well. But the jab is certainly his most versatile. And whereas normally against orthodox opponents, he uses it to stab the body, a punch that has tremendous stopping power, really works well to keep opponents from closing the distance on him. He'll throw it to the head and snap heads back. He'll also feel out the range with it, prod, open up his opponent's guard. He'll also use it as a follow-up to the sweeping right hand he likes to throw, which people tend to ooh and ah because it looks like a big punch, but it's almost always a kind of a distraction for the jab. When he threw it against Miguel Cotto, for example, that sweeping right hand around the guard, he really just kind of forced Cotto to open his gloves and then really speared him with the jab, his money punch down the middle. So the fact that it goes away against southpaws is not something I like. And you know, I think of Floyd, as many boxing fans do, as the great adjuster. He adjusts over the course of a fight better than almost anyone else in the sport. Perhaps Terrence Crawford's maybe coming for that throne when Floyd Mayweather retires, but it's not something that most fighters do really well. It's a rare ability to be able to pick up on these small tactical openings and opportunities, find out what's working and what isn't, and by the 7th or 8th round, Floyd Mayweather is almost always just completely taking his opponent apart. Almost every one of his measured, slow-paced fights, the volume turns up, the accuracy turns up. He's happy to get aggressive by around the 8th round. That was when he started knocking Canelo Alvarez around and hitting him with uppercuts and lead rights through the gloves. And that was when he really got into his swing in the first fight against Marcos Maidana and started to clearly take over that fight by the 8th round. That's usually, mid-late fight. He's doing that. And against Southpaws, I think he tends to make his adjustments before the fight ever takes place. And, you say that that's a credit to his ability to adapt, but then we tend to see him facing new problems against Southpaws later in the fight. And they tend to be closer fights down the stretch. Whereas his fights with orthodox opponents, where he just allows himself to sort of discover the game plan over the course of the fight, he only gets better as the fight wears on. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there are a few exceptions to the rule. If we're looking at modern example or more recent examples, because if you look further back, you'll see Floyd finding his feet in Southpaws. I mean, for a quick example, I'm sure we'll touch on this more later, but in the DeMarcus Corley fight, excuse me, there was no limited offense at all from Floyd. He opened up just as he would against anyone. In many ways, even though he was at light welterweight, and a lot of people assume that after the first Jose Luis Castillo fight that Floyd reined back his offense. Against DeMarcus Corley, who was a southpaw, Floyd threw combinations just as he did at super featherweight. So maybe that's a fallacy in itself. But maybe that is also the tipping point, because since then, where Floyd was buzzed a few times, maybe people make more of that than they should, but certainly Floyd found Corley a tricky customer. Floyd doesn't fight like that. He does, as we've said, rein things in. Now, usually he sets himself up to take control of the fight early against Southpaws, and maybe he coasts a bit more in the later stages. I'm not quite sure that I can say anybody's made it too difficult for him down the stretch post Corley anyway, Southpaw anyway. But Victor Ortiz, he had some success early, and that was a fight where Floyd couldn't really assert himself. Ortiz was a bit too quick, a bit too young, a bit too strong. Floyd did rally, and the circumstances at the end of that fight is a whole different discussion. But that's a fight where Floyd couldn't really put his stamp on the fight straight away. You see, had someone like Robert Guerrero, who's quite a bit of a plodder. He hasn't got very fast feet. He's very much a face-first kind of guy who comes forward and wants to sit on your chest nowadays. Anyway, Floyd was able to take the initiative and basically dominate him for the entire fight using a very limited arsenal. Again, the whole thing is this what he's going to do against Manny Pacquiao? And is it going to work? I think that's what we want to see. I'm not sure whether he's going to take a different tack, to be honest with you, in this fight. I think you might see even though not Southpaws, Castillo to Maidana to Guerrero type performance from Floyd, where I think that he's going to limit himself. He's going to use a lot of movement. But I think I think it's an effective way. I'm very much on the other side to you. I think this is a positive way for Floyd to fight because he knows his limitations against Southpaws.
Well, I think you're right in picking up on the DeMarcus Corley fight as kind of a standout southpaw fight of Floyd's career. There's actually a stretch there between 2004 and 2006 where Floyd fought the majority of his opponents. 3 of his 5 opponents were southpaws. He fought DeMarcus Corley, action fight, in part because DeMarcus Corley hit Mayweather harder and cleaner than just about anybody else in his entire career, very consistently, in fact, though Mayweather himself beat the crap out of DeMarcus Corley as well, hit him with lots of heavy punches. Then we had Henry Bruselis and Arturo Gatti, but then we had 2 southpaws, Charmbe Mitchell, which was an exceptionally easy fight for Mayweather. Mitchell really didn't have the type of style to threaten Mayweather, so that was really Mayweather fighting just like a normal Floyd Mayweather fight. And then Zab Judah, which to me is kind of the turning point, the real turning point. It's the last fight, both the last fight in which Floyd fought a southpaw as he fights everybody else, and also the first fight in which he started to fight southpaws differently. Because against Zab Judah, we see Floyd kind of using his jab, throwing it, even catching Zab with it, but also getting countered. The one time he threw a jab against Judah, and Judah whipped a counter right hook and caught him on the ear and knocked him down. It wasn't counted as a knockdown, of course, but Floyd's glove hit the canvas. His balance was disrupted, and that happened a few times. Often it hit Floyd in the back of the head. It wasn't really a clean scoring blow, but he had a lot of difficulty jabbing Judah without being countered with that right hook. And suddenly realized that he had more success with the right hand. And so that was one where he did adjust over the course of the fight. He took away the tools that weren't working for him, the jab. The left hook upstairs wasn't really landing either, and found the ones that were. And of course, as we've seen in all of Floyd's southpaw fights since then, it was the straight right. The lead right was his weapon of choice, both to the head and the body, and the left hook to the body made quite an appearance as well. Whereas the left hand jab was just kind of relegated to a measuring stick. It wasn't really used offensively. And so it's almost like Mayweather, you can kind of see a transformation in Mayweather in this one fight where he kind of found his one-size-fits-all southpaw game plan, and he's stuck with it ever since. He's stuck with it when he fought Victor Ortiz. He stuck with it when he fought Robert Guerrero. Granted, that's a pretty small sample size, too. Is Floyd, that's only 3 fights where he really fought southpaws with this conservative, pared-down method where it was really reduced to the right hand. I don't know. Does he fight all southpaws like that? Is it really fair to say it? I will say one thing. Floyd fights very well using his right hand as his jab instead of the left. He fights very well with that classic southpaw ideology, but it does I just find something strange about it. With Floyd being such an intelligent boxer, having such excellent ring IQ, that he would limit himself to just this textbook style of fighting southpaws, because everybody and their mother could tell you, oh, the jab is harder to land against southpaws. The right hand, the straight right, the rear hand becomes the dominant weapon. And I don't really think that's true. I think we've seen lots of fighters, both southpaws fighting orthodox fighters and vice versa, show that all the weapons are just as effective. Andre Ward had great success jabbing Chad Dawson. Vasily Lomachenko fights all kinds of orthodox opponents. He dominated his last opponent using just his lead right hand, using just his jab and his right hook, because he broke his left hand about the 3rd round of the fight. So it just kind of irks me. It troubles me in a way that Floyd Mayweather, a fighter of Floyd Mayweather's caliber, could be reduced to a limited version of himself just because he's fighting someone in the opposite stance. I feel confident that Floyd Mayweather could learn to use his jab against southpaws, but instead he seems to have just assumed that it won't work. And so for the past 3 fights against southpaws, he's basically just decided not to throw what I consider to be his best and most versatile punch.
Well, yeah, I agree with you as well. But at the same time, I think people might, it's almost a vicious circle away, but Floyd is so well renowned that people might actually expect a little bit too much of him at times. I think it's kind of weird that I'm the one who's sticking up for Mayweather here, because anybody who knows me knows that I've not exactly been I'm critical of everyone of every fighter, because nobody's perfect, but there's certain things about Floyd that which do irk me. Maybe not Floyd himself, but certainly a certain contingent of Floyd's fans. Anybody watching this will know exactly what I'm talking about. The kind of people that think Floyd is TBE. Even if Floyd was TBE, there's nothing wrong with doing what works. And I think actually you're right. Maybe the Judah fight was the final nail in the coffin to him being a bit more,
diverse in his approach to southpaws.
Diverse and offensive approach, but maybe just more forceful. I don't know, man. It's hard to explain.
It seems to be a risk-averse approach to fighting southpaws now, whereas Mayweather's always not a fighter who jumps into taking risks, but typically
he's known for blistering combinations and being able to take people out. And I can't think of any southpaws that he's. Oh yeah, look, he battered Corley, and he battered Emmanuel Augustus, who was a switch hitter. But I'll tell you what, man. If you want to go back, you've seen this fight. I've seen this fight. If you want to go all the way back, and if people want to think that I'm not being critical of Floyd and maybe I'm some kind of Floyd fanboy, then maybe they'll change tactic or change their opinion. Because in Floyd's second professional fight, fought a guy called Reggie Sanders. You've seen the fight. Sanders was, I think, 1-1 at the time I said. But hey, Floyd was a novice pro. He barely turned professional. Now Sanders went on to be a pretty good journeyman. He fought. He was a good guy to get the rounds in for any prospect, and I think he probably still is, or at least till a couple of years ago he was. But Mayweather looked incredibly sloppy, not just in his offensive choices, the fact he couldn't barely hit Sanders, who, hey, Floyd might have only been a novice pro, but so was Sanders. And Floyd was a very experienced amateur and a guy who would go on within 17 months or whatever it was, 17 fights and not very long at all, to be a world champion. And Sanders got on the inside of Floyd. He made him look very disorganized in his movements, both forwards and backwards. And Floyd just couldn't get his normal offensive range off. He couldn't find his range. He couldn't get any. He tried to be diverse with his approach, and he was sloppy. He was hitting thin air. He was getting booed, and he got cut. Now, people will say you're looking too much into a fight, which is essentially a novice pro. But if you're overanalyzing something like we am, and we're overanalyzing a certain aspect of Floyd's game, is that where all this started? Where the whole Floyd versus Southpaws, not just in the opinion of the fans, but maybe in Floyd's own head, started, where Floyd thought, oh, well, you know, in the 90s, he would have seen a lot of Southpaws in the amateurs. So it's not like he never fought a Southpaw. But hey, it goes without saying, he hasn't fought a lot of Southpaws. And he doesn't look the same.
And I do believe that it was after the DeMarcus Corley fight, Floyd Sr. Said that Floyd shouldn't fight a southpaw ever again. He didn't want him to fight any more southpaws after how much damage he took in that fight. There's always just been this kind of thing. And I think we've mentioned this before. You and I may have discussed this on another occasion, Kyle, but is it maybe something in the whole Mayweather style? Is it the shoulder roll dominant, the right hand up to defend, the left shoulder in front of the chin, the crab Grand Rapids, Michigan boxing style that they use that makes it difficult to fight southpaws? This is something I don't think I've mentioned before, but I think it may have something to do with the fact that in that stance, because Floyd stands like he's on a skateboard or a surfboard. His feet are both very much turned to the side. He's very, very much a side-on stance, to the extent that he almost turns his back on a lot of his opponents when he's defending the right hand. It's very difficult to move and to cover the distance when your feet are not aligned properly. Everybody knows that, you know, the basic dominant angle against a southpaw fighter is that outside angle. And for Floyd to be able to put himself in that position, he kind of has to abandon his fundamental position. He has to abandon that stance and open himself up, which is why against southpaws, perhaps, we see him so much more in this double forearm guard, leaning forward, trying to bait out leads. He can't fight with his normal style because against an orthodox fighter, he can block their left hook here, he can put his right shoulder here, and they really just can't hit him in the head. With anything. It takes a great deal of effort and deception. You have to get him to move one way and then capitalize with something else, and Floyd's got great vision and awareness. It's very difficult to pull a kind of trick like that on him. But against a southpaw, you can't shoulder roll the left hand, the straight left of a southpaw. And if the southpaw decides to take one step around to the outside of your shoulder, suddenly he's behind you, and he can just slug away while you're turning to adjust to keep up, and then while you're turning, he can hit you. So it really takes away the stuff that makes Floyd who he is. And I think we saw similar stuff when Floyd's uncle Roger fought Pernell Whitaker and had a lot of difficulty just kind of establishing himself in front of Whitaker, who was one of the slickest southpaws of all time. He just could not find a good position from which to punch Whitaker.
He did sit him down, though. Uncle Rog did sit Whitaker down. The thing is, Uncle Roger as well, you got to think, look, there are moments, but I don't think people realise how good Roger Mayweather was. They think that he was a chinny puncher. He actually was not. If you watch him against Vinny Pazienza years before he packed on the muscle and fought Roy Jones Jr. when he was actually at his natural weight, there are a lot of things that Roger does in that fight which are quite similar to what Floyd does. He limits his output and he lands the pull counter and shoot it back with the uppercut or the over or the right straight. And Roger done a lot of things really, really well. And Roger was a phenomenal puncher, but he was not as skilled as Floyd.
No, I think you can say
that full well.
I think you can.
I think Floyd is very much the marriage of Floyd Senior's defense and Roger's offense. But he doesn't have the pure power that Uncle Roger had. I mean, Roger really was a venomous puncher, man. He can knock people out for a week. You know, he really did hit hard. He didn't have a great chin, though. But you're right. Against Whitaker, he struggled. But then again, I think Floyd would probably struggle against Whitaker for the same reasons. I think most people struggle against Whitaker for the same reasons. But we did talk about this before, and we were trying to think of examples where that style, particularly the Mayweather brand of that style, is faced off with southpaws. And couldn't really particularly think of any other than Rog versus Whitaker. Really, I couldn't really think of many.
We've got Floyd's Floyd Jr. or rather Floyd Joey Sinclair, as he's pointed out. He's not actually Floyd Jr. But we've got examples from Floyd Mayweather's own career where that style, he's tried the movements of the Mayweather style ineffectively against Southpaws. I remember one instance stands out very clearly in my memory where he was fighting Zab Judah, had his shoulder up, had his hand here, and typically when the left hand comes from an orthodox fighter, he will turn his body, the opposite motion of the shoulder roll, and catch the left hook on his glove. And he tried to do this to the straight left of Zab Judah, and because it didn't come around the side, he got hit clean in the chin and knocked back. And in fact, I believe DeMarcus Corley hit him with doing the same thing, just threw an overhand left right down the center, and there just doesn't seem to be the Mayweather, I like to call it a system, right? Because the Mayweather system, it's systematically arranged. A number of tactics and techniques, they all fit together. If you throw the right hand at Floyd, he's going to shoulder roll it. And then if you follow with the left hook, he's either going to come back and block, or if you throw an upward left hook, he'll roll under it. He has each movement comes after another movement. Everything fits together. And that system is not designed to fight Southpaws. I really don't think that it is. The same movements don't work against the backwards combinations of a Southpaw fighter. So I think more than other fighters, maybe Floyd is limited in the kinds of things that he can do with his systematic way of fighting against a left-hander. He cannot simply do the same thing against a Southpaw as other fighters do.
Well, yeah, definitely. And I think another thing you got to think is I actually think Floyd should be built to jab Southpaws, because when Southpaws jab him with their right hand, Floyd, you think, would be absolutely primed to smack it down and shoot his jab and spin out and reset as you think he would do. But it just seems completely missing from that part of his game against Southpaws.
Well, I'll tell you why I think it is. I have a theory, and it may be a little too technical for this kind of discussion, but if you watch him trying to jab Zab Judah, he'll throw his jab, and Judah will step. So here, I'll try and mirror it for people looking in the camera. He'll throw his jab. Here's my jab. And Judah will move this way. He'll move to Floyd's left and throw the right hook over the top. And because Floyd's feet are both so turned in to the side like this, when he throws his jab, he's so side on, he can't stop that angle from happening if he relies on his jab. He doesn't jab pointing his toes straight forward. He jabs from that sideways stance. And so if you hit him from that side, because you can say he wasn't hurt when Judah knocked him down, but he was so off balance in that position.
He's blindsided.
Yeah, he
was blindsided.
Exactly. He could not keep his feet because Judah's right hook, essentially, it was like being hit in the center of the back with both your feet pointing forward. He was not positioned to keep his balance when a shot like that came. So I think, maybe Floyd's right. Maybe other fighters can adjust using their same tactics, but some of Floyd's tactics, because of the specificity of his style, it just doesn't work against left-handed fighters. It doesn't work against Southpaws.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, actually. I think Roger Mayweather, let me just check, man. Sorry for everyone at home, but I actually do think that Roger Mayweather may have actually a really good performance against Southpaws against Samuel Serrano, but I'm struggling to remember whether Serrano was a Southpaw, which is ridiculous because I uploaded the fight to YouTube and I watched it about 30 times, but never mind. But yeah, as you've already alluded to, Floyd tends to square up a bit more against Southpaws. You have the higher guard, maybe that's how he does adapt against Southpaws, because you'll see sometimes when he starts off against Southpaws, he's a little bit lower and then he'll come in, he'll lean forward. The question is, again, is this going to work against Manny Pacquiao, a guy who can throw fast combinations? Against the two Southpaws we've mentioned in recent years, which have actually started off quite well against Floyd Mayweather, Zab Judah and Victor Ortiz, they are guys that are known to fold mentally, if not down the stretch, then within 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah, and Judah in particular was not a combination puncher. Judah had speed comparable to Manny Pacquiao's, and Ortiz had tenacity comparable to Manny Pacquiao's, but neither of them is really anything close to Manny Pacquiao, who is a combination puncher, who is absolutely relentless, and in fact seems to fight harder when you hit him with a clean shot. He tends to just grit his teeth and come back even more consistently once he gets hit. Can Floyd fight Manny Pacquiao? I mean, I guess that's a question that everybody's asking. It's not really even one that's worth asking until we see the fight. And for everybody watching this, we've got 12 live viewers, Kyle. Can you believe that? For everybody watching this right now, we'll be giving our picks the week of the fight, just a few days before May 2nd, later on in the series. But Floyd versus Southpaws. And you know what, Kyle? I think he also struggled against the jab of Miguel Cotto for the same reason. And maybe it's just something. Maybe it's just something in the style. And Miguel Cotto often threw the jab as sort of a left cross, where he would throw his right hand and load up his left shoulder, and then come down the middle with the left hand, this long, straight, powerful left.
Miguel is a converted southpaw, so maybe there's something in there. For everyone watching live, apologies that I had to check out, but it's terrible that for someone who prides himself as a boxing historian, forgot that Samuel Serrano is an orthodox fighter. But you got to remember, guys, I've watched so many fights that sometimes slightly obscure fighters are even a mystery to me. And also got to say that anybody who's watching either live or later who thinks that we're just dissecting Floyd's style and just looking for ways for Manny Pacquiao to beat him, we're going to be looking the other direction as well, because there's many things that Floyd does that Manny struggles with. And if people think that we're just looking one way and maybe we're hoping that there's some kind of way that people say there's no blueprint. Is there a blueprint? Well, there's a blueprint to beat Manny Pacquiao. We're going to look at that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to finish off by saying, I think the Mayweather style is designed to diffuse the right hand. That is the true genius of Mayweather's style, is that it takes away the right hand, most fighters' best punch. And perhaps its biggest weakness is that it is not designed really to consistently stop straight punches from the left hand. Even jabs, fighters who jab very well have through his career gotten in on Floyd because all he has is the catch of that jab. He doesn't slip particularly well when it comes to those big punches, and when he does, he often ends up in a position from which he can't counter. So that's the weakness. But you know, I've kind of come around over the course of this video. I think that given that that really is a credit to the genius of Floyd as a boxer, because he has found a way to consistently beat southpaws despite an inherent weakness in his style to fighters of the southpaw persuasion. He beats them pretty easily, actually, using basically one punch, which you got to give him credit for that. It's hard to really fault a guy who, you know, that's like essentially at a certain point, we'd be criticizing him for being too good. You know, all of his failures stand out more because there are so few of them. And, you know, he really does fight southpaws well. No southpaw can really say to have come close to beating Floyd, you know?
Yeah, I think you remember that the fact that Floyd was hit by 2 or 3 punches by certain fighters or given a bloody nose by Emmanuel Augustus, it stands out because it very rarely happens. And I think to anybody as well who thinks that, oh, well, no, Floyd, it's not a fault. A lot of people like to think that Floyd Mayweather is perfect. He is the insurmountable boxer. No one can figure him out. Give me any great fighter and I'll tell you they had a weakness. Sugar Ray Robinson, believe it or not, guys, was not that great defensively. You know, Joe Louis, look, his footwork was completely functional. He was not a dancer. He was not very evasive. His feet did not allow him to be evasive. Floyd Mayweather is not 100% perfect against southpaws, but he is functional against them. Yeah.
And surprisingly so, you could say, looking at how he has struggled against them in the past. Then you watch him fight, because let's be honest, there's a speed difference there, but Robert Guerrero is pretty similar to Victor Ortiz. And yet Floyd really had no difficulties with Robert Guerrero whatsoever.
Yeah, he stopped southpaws being southpaws.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird that in a way, by lowering his own offensive diversity, he forces southpaws to lower their output. Because when what they usually do walks them straight into getting a real sharp right counter in the face, they don't want to do it anymore. And people say what you want to say about Floyd Mayweather's punching power. He's a real stinging, spiteful puncher. He might have bad hands and he might not carry a huge natural dig at welterweight. No one's ever going to mistake him for being a Pepino Cuevas-esque banger or Thomas Hearns. But Mayweather really does sting guys. And he forces them to stop doing what they usually do. Funnily enough, by stop doing what he usually does.
Yeah, that's a great way to end the episode. I think that's basically all we can say. Floyd versus southpaws. Does he struggle? Kind of, but not really. I guess that's the conclusion we've come to. Stay tuned. Our next episode of Figuring Out the Fight, as Kyle alluded to earlier, will be Manny Pacquiao versus counterpunchers. And go figure, Floyd Mayweather happens to be a pretty damn good counterpuncher. So we'll have a lot to talk about. And Manny's past experiences with counterpunchers. Has he struggled? And how might he be able to adjust for what just may be the most dangerous counterpuncher of his career? So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been Figuring Out the Fight. I've been Connor Rebush. My co-host has been Kyle McLaughlin. If you want to get at us on social media and discuss some of the things we talked about here, you can find me on Twitter at BoxingBush. Kyle, your Twitter handle?
At Ferocious Flea.
And of course, if you want to find these videos and lots of other Mayweather-Pacquiao boxing analysis and basically every other fight that's important in boxing, you can find that over at badlefthook.com. Thank you once again for watching, and have a nice day.